Greetings. Welcome to a new episode of Art Matters. I'm your host, Wayne Quackenbush, and today we have a very special guest. An old friend of mine from back in the art school days has deigned to make an appearance. Markus Early,
Hey, Wayne.
architectural lighting designer. Our history goes back to many decades ago. We won't say how many, at Pratt Institute, and you were interior design student.
Yep, that's right.
And then I was in illustration, and we crossed paths at the dorm and ended up in a kind of in a squat in a brownstone in Brooklyn, which we would not be able to afford now probably.
Right.
And went our separate ways and moved to Rhode Island the same year, but reconnected just this summer.
Yeah,
So,
after many years.
Yes.
Strange
so,
coincidence.
Yeah, because you moved here from North Jersey, and I moved here from upstate New York back then, and we were living two towns away from each other basically for many years. So it was amazing to reconnect with you and have you on the show, and we have to lead into
Sure.
all the stuff that you do because it's
Right.
a
So,
lot.
yeah, well, basically I studied interior architecture at
Yep.
Pratt Institute,
Yep.
but I took a lighting class and fell in love with that medium and never looked back. So I started working for one of the big name lighting designers, Howard Branston Lighting Design in New York City, and just went right to work the day after I graduated.
You had all sorts of projects. I think you helped with the redesign of 42nd Street.
Yep, that was a project. We did many things, including Macy's. He also designed the new Statue of Liberty lighting back in '86. So I've been with him for a long time. And then I worked for a couple of lighting manufacturers. I also was on my own in Providence as a lighting consultant. And I also got into being an educator. So I went back to Pratt and taught lighting design there, and most recently at the Rhode Island School of Design, where I taught for 10 years in the interior architecture as well as graduate and undergraduate division there. So lighting design has become sort of like my thing. I wake up and go to sleep and walk around looking at ceilings and thinking about space and people and how they interact and what's important for people to see, and also the creative as well as the scientific aspects of it. So it's a real art and a science.
You always start with architecture is the mother of all art. Now, whose quote is that?
Sure. That's a Frank Lloyd Wright quote.
Yep.
I'll show you on a couple of slides.
Yep.
A couple of interesting quotes, but that is one of his quotes. And so that's very much the case, because a lot of people take architecture for granted because it's just spaces that we occupy or work
people
in
don't
or
notice.
go into, and unless you're in a museum or a fancy architectural space, you might not think about it every day. And a lot of people don't even think about lighting, but we're all making lighting decisions all the time.
But it affects us in so many different ways.
Sure.
It affects our mood, and it affects everything about us.
Absolutely.
How we move through the world.
That's
basically.
right. So I think of it as like a visual itinerary that people are taking as they get from point A to point B, whether you're the CEO arriving to your fancy office or the courier making a delivery. They have to be able to find their way from point A to point B. If you think about your favorite restaurant or pub that you like to go to, you might not know why you go there. It could be the music or the food. It could be also the lighting. So as a lighting designer, I always feel like my job is done when no one notices the lighting, and it's just a clean, well-lighted place, to quote Hemingway.
And usually on this show we have representational artists, painters and the like, and they're actually representing light, but you're actually, I would say, painting with light.
That's one way that you could think about it.
Yeah.
And then so you're creating spaces with light. If you think about if the lights went out in the studio right now, we would be pitch darkness.
We'd be on the radio.
And that's right. And you wouldn't be able to see it all. So, the way I think about it is no light, no space.
Right.
So, light brings everything into form and reality. And so it is a matter of painting with light or carving space with light. things of that nature.
And you wanted to do a demo of a light source?
Right. So basically, like in the old days, it was incandescent and tungsten halogen, and that was always the go-to light source. But for the last 10 or 15 years, LED technology has really overtaken the market, and it's actually the most efficient and even more flexible because it's actually a digital light form. The light that gets emitted by an LED is really an electron jumping across a gap. And the resulting energy that gets released is photons.
Okay.
So photons are part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and that's visible light range
Is
from
it a
all
particle or is it a wave?
That's right. That's correct. You could think about it both ways, and so it is that visible range of light are the colors of the rainbow. So I'll show you some LED fixtures here, which looks like we might not be able to see those at this time.
Okay, no
but
problem.
basically you have red and green and blue of equal intensity make white light.
Right.
So if you take a prism or see a rainbow, you're seeing what is making up the white light of daylight. And
Right,
so
it's separating out the different wavelengths.
That's right.
And showing the different colors of the spectrum.
that's right. And so when red and green and blue are used, you can create all the different colors of the rainbow, just like the back, what's behind a TV or a laptop screen or a computer screen. So there's definitely a process that one goes through. It just like in any art form, there's a concept phase and then a working out the details phase. And a lot of times working with architects, you're helping them bring their vision to life. So one of the catchphrases that my mentor always used was, "What do you wish to see?" And so a lighting designer is helping to bring an architect's vision to life through equipment and technique, all borrowed from stage lighting.
Right.
And so anyone that's watching this who wanted to learn more about architectural lighting, there are lots of good books out there, and there's webinars and things like that, professional organizations that you can Google. And I brought a few books.
Books to show off.
Right. Of course, a lot of things derive from theatrical lighting. So there's one well-known book that's from the 1930s that's called A Method of Lighting the Stage by Stanley McCandless, who was a Yale professor and pioneered stage lighting. And other book, this is an older book now, but it's Perception as Form Givers for Architecture. So that was a really important book back in the day. Other books that are important, that are, there's a lot of them, I just brought a handful. The Architecture of Light, this is all about making light and space with architectural products. Then another great one is called Designing with Light.
Okay, sure.
And my original mentor, Howard Branston, wrote his own book, modeled after the Stanley McCandless book, called Learning to See, A Matter of Light. And also nowadays, we won't be talking about it much today, but circadian rhythm lighting is important too for circadian entrainment. So this is one book that's about that topic.
And so that's reflecting the biological reflection of light on human beings and creatures, right?
That's
Something
right,
like
yeah.
that?
We're all biological creatures. People are animals, some
And
more
we're
than others.
Affected by light seasonally and also daily.
That's right. You
Right.
can, like in the winter, you have like the winter blues. Well, that's actually seasonal affective disorder.
Yep.
Is a clinical definition of that. But also, you want to be able to have like bright days and dark nights, so that we are actually within our own personal biological rhythm. We're syncing with the rotation of the Earth.
Correct.
So daylight is important, and then in the evening having darker, quieter lighting, more like a firelight glow. So we can get into that maybe in another episode.
Right.
But back to architectural lighting, I did bring a bunch of images that we can take a look at the appropriate time. And
Okay,
from
sure.
light artists to a little bit about the process and some of my projects over the years.
And why don't we go about you starting that like right about now?
Sure, sounds good. Okay, Wayne, so like we were saying, we really have to start with architecture. And
Yes.
so, I've got a couple of quotes by, a philosopher, Hegel, talked about architecture does not animate in a manner like sculpture, architecture. really becomes an artfully shaped surrounding. You could think of it as a constructed shelter that can be described as architectural sculpture or sculptural architecture. And it was Frank Lloyd Wright who said, the mother art is architecture. He also said, without an architecture of our own, we have no sense of our own civilization. So in that respect, architecture and design for human beings is cultural. And also with respect to lighting design, a lighting solution that works in the United States might not work in Mexico City or Norway or Japan. So there are different aspects.
Would that depend on the culture, or would it depend on the light source, or what would it depend on?
It could depend on cultural, but culture is also formed by the geography, where you are on the planet. Like Inuit people are very different than South American native tribes,
the length of days and the temperature. I mean,
that's correct. Yeah. For example, in Scandinavia, they very much like to have warm light sources, whereas in hotter climates, nearer to the equator, cooler color temperature, cooler white light can be preferred.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if a lot of people are aware that light and color have temperature too.
That's right. It is equated to a Kelvin scale. So you think back a blacksmith sticking an iron into the fire. It's going to get red hot,
right,
then orange, white hot, basically go through all the colors of, to blue hot, really, really hot. So that is the scale by which the color temperature is correlated. That's like the warmness or coolness of a light source is measured in Kelvin.
Okay.
So, Frank Lloyd Wright also has another quote that says, the space within becomes the reality of the building. So that relates directly to interior architecture, in that, people need to, function in a space, and when you have walls to keep the weather out, you also limit the amount of daylight that can come in. And so this goes all the way back to classical architecture. So as we can see on the screen here, we've got a picture of the Parthenon, ancient Greek architecture, the proportions, the aesthetics of it, as we all know, that was artfully and beautifully designed, but also there was a design for the roof structure and having skylights built in.
And letting daylight in.
And in fact, that's right. And in fact, what you're seeing right now is a replica of the Parthenon that was built in Tennessee. I think it's outside of Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an actual real space, and you can see here that they did have sculptures in there in the beginning, and it housed sculptures in the high culture of Greece. So in the reproduction space that they built in Tennessee, that can be used, and we can see the colonnade and the skylight design. And speaking of another classical architectural form from ancient Rome, the Parthenon,
mm-hmm.
right? Think of the oculus in the top of the domed ceiling to let light in.
Now wait, the Parthenon is Greek.
That's right.
You said Rome.
I'm sorry, I meant the Pantheon.
Right.
Pantheon.
Yeah.
Pantheon in Rome versus the Parthenon in Greece.
Greece, correct.
Anyway, so here we have views of the Pantheon. And so this is a painting on the left and the real space on the right. Still, you could go to Rome today and walk around in there and
well, you can
check it
also
out.
see how our founding fathers and government officials loved the Romans and the Greeks, and a lot of federal and state buildings replicate that style.
That's correct.
And the lighting and the opening in the dome and all of that.
That's correct. Yep. So, and there's a shot straight up at the oculus. Other couple of quotes here. It was German poet Goethe who said that music is like liquid architecture, and
mm-hmm.
architecture is frozen music. Thoreau said the question is not what to look at but what you see. And then my mentor Branston talked about light like music. It fills, reveals, and creates space. And then a question that he always would ask his clients is, what do you wish to see? And so with that, we'll continue. And we're now taking a look at some light as an art form. So artists such as James Turrell worked with light as a medium to create light sculptures. And so whether they had an oculus or a faux oculus or indirect lighting happening somehow,
Now, was that a skylight or Oculus?
that was a painting above a skylight,
Oh, okay.
above a domed ceiling.
Yep, I see.
But this one, as you can see, is like a plane with a hole in it.
Right, right.
And so that's a very simplified version of the Pantheon.
Mm-hmm.
And then, light in nature and introducing forms and surfaces, juxtaposing light and form and surface with natural surroundings and reflections of water. And you can think of all kinds of artists and paintings. These are some works by another lighting artist that worked with neon and flexible tubing, Jung Lee. And so this artist created all kinds of abstract expressions and even doing things with words.
Now, it's hard to tell from a monitor. Is that out on a water surface?
Yeah, that's out like on the beach.
Okay.
Or it could even be like in the snow.
So you're reflecting, the environment is reflecting the light and and setting off the. Once you start introducing words and stuff, it brings it to a whole other dimension too.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And these are some other installations, even before LED. Artists such as Dan Flavin, whose work this is, worked with fluorescent and neon tubing and colored gels, and created all sorts of beautiful spaces that were, it's not just about the light, but the space that the light reveals.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a large retrospective of his work at the Guggenheim Museum,
Yep.
which coincidentally is a Frank Lloyd Wright building.
Of course.
So these are some shots of that. And basically like, that central shaft under the skylight, that big luminous tube, it's just a bunch of fluorescent tubes. So it's just like, you could think of the industrial nature of a fluorescent tube, but here created into a cylindrical work of art.
Yeah, it's using it to enhance it's its own aesthetic and
That's right, that's right. Yep. So light itself as an art form. And then shape or pattern. These are some outdoor lighting sculptures by a contemporary artist that works with light named Lenny Schwendinger. And she does beautiful things with patterns and surfaces and streaks of light in architectural spaces that people use every day in a lot of major cities. And one place where architecture and light intersect quite often is in large industrial projects, like for example this bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And locally here we have the Seconic River Bridge that bridges between Portsmouth and Tiverton, Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
And so that in the evening has some decorative lighting that's vertical poles, and they can be multiple colors like the rainbow. Or you can also think about, in big cities like the Empire State Building in New York City, all the different lighting. They'll have red, green, red, white, and blue at 4th of July, and different colors at holiday time.
So is that all LED lighting at this point?
That it used to be fluorescent, but it all got changed to LED. So now, because LED is a digital light source, like we talked about earlier, it's all completely programmable.
Right.
And so it can be it's basically like a lighting show. And in fact, theater lighting is also all digital LED lighting nowadays too. Very, very little use of incandescent. So it's a lot of an energy story as well as greater flexibility
Right, because
of control.
it's energy efficient. And you
Very.
made the point earlier that it's to be polite, it's a lot easier to be a lighting designer now than it was back in the fluorescent and incandescent days.
In a manner of speaking, in terms of the flexibility that people have, and like the type of equipment and what it can do, and things have gotten smaller. The gear is a little bit smaller. Back in the old days of fluorescent, it was a glass tube and you had certain lengths, but now LED lighting can be on
Any length.
ropes
and
and
yeah.
flexible strips. And like, for example, what you see here on this image of the Hone Bridge in the central North America. I think it's in Minnesota. That also has beautiful LED lighting that can be programmed for different scenes, and light reflecting off the water becomes a beautiful expression of light and really entertaining for people. In fact, think of like in the Providence area where you have water fire.
Yes.
So people come out of the woodwork and are at water fire to hear the ambient music and the flames and the scent. And so, that water fire sculpture by Barnaby Evans became a beautiful, long-term permanent installation because of the power of light and the warmth of the fire and people's sense of wanting to have that interaction.
It goes back to what you would call the caveman days, when everybody came around the fire and gathered at night for warmth, and that was the beginning of our socializing and
That's
gathering
right.
together and storytelling and all of that. And
That's correct.
everything that we do kind of reflects back to that somehow, depending on where you live in the world.
Sure. That was the original social media.
Sure.
I was camping. I was around the campfire, telling stories, cave paintings, the like, and that also equates exactly to circadian rhythm and circadian entrainment for people. If you think about the folks who lived in hunter-gatherer era, they during the day would be out and about. So you wake up in the morning, you leave your shelter, you go out and hopefully make it back with some food for the family, and then in the evening, the sun is gone because the earth rotated, and so you discovered fire and you're keeping yourself warm. So that's how we evolved and grew, with light and dark as a cycle. So
Right.
that's part of why in interior lighting today, people spend up to 90% of their time indoors, and they are not necessarily getting enough of the wavelengths and the light levels that they need to be in sync with the earth like the old days.
And that's also kind of reflects on how people may have trouble sleeping because they're on their phones too much.
That's correct. Yeah, there's sort of like a good blue light for circadian stimulus, but also I'm sure we've all read articles and seen news reports about, don't be watching the iPod late at night.
Right.
Especially depending on age group, like high school kids, they might want to stay up late at night and doing homework, but you also might have trouble waking up in the morning. And older folks and in senior living facilities, you want to be able to have bright days, but also people can be sensitive to glare as the eye gets older.
Right.
So, so coming full circle from that bridge lighting, outdoor and abstract and fire and daylight, full circle back to architectural spaces in an interior. This, of course, is like a giant scale paper lantern by the artist Isamu Noguchi. And that, again, he was one of the first sculpture artists to work with light as a medium and Japanese paper making techniques. And so
Yeah, the old school lanterns, and except
That's
at a
correct,
larger scale,
yeah.
it's almost like you bring a moon inside.
that's correct. So
Yeah.
that's very naturalistic and very warming to the soul and comforting to you psychologically,
There's
emotionally.
always comfort in a circular form because it's complete and compact and
Right.
not
And that's
upsetting.
right. And so here's some of his fixtures in a gallery. So those little paper lanterns look like they're sort of like growing up out of the earth. A lot of things like you might even see in anime videos today that are popular, in great shows that you can watch that are full of all kinds of fun things. And here's they also make a paper pyramid that, believe it or not, that's about a 8 foot by 12 foot space. This is a project that I did the lighting design for in a loft in New York City. And so I used Akari, which was the name of the Isamu Noguchi paper lantern sculptures, and you can buy those today. You can go to noguchi.org and check those things out and buy Akari lanterns at home for home use. But this was an 8 by 12 group of pyramids, and it all comes as one piece of paper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so we built a frame around it. So to give people a rough idea about the types of things that a lighting designer, whether you're a lighting artist or an architectural designer such as myself, there are some inherent qualities and functions of light. 4 basic qualities: intensity, color, distribution, movement, which you could also think about as change. Think of like daylight to sunrise to sunset. Here's a sunrise to sunset.
Yeah, the different qualities of light represented, sure. And the
That's
different
right.
times
And
of
so
day.
there we have like cool light on the left and warm evening glow as the sun sets, and that equates to the fire in the evening. Then there's some basic functions of light. And so anybody could walk into any space and say, oh, I can identify the qualities and the functions of light. And that's something that is second nature to me as a person that worked with lighting as a design medium. But what's the number one function? We talked earlier, it's visibility, right? Like no light, no space. And that can become a philosophical rabbit hole, you know, that they could easily travel down. And so like architecture, what is architecture is really light, and light is an invisible medium, so light is really materials. So again, back to the particle, is it a wave or is it a particle? Is it a science, is it an art form? But light also does reveal the form of things as a second important function, the way you highlight something, shade and shadow. Third important function of light, architecturally speaking, is to create a composition. All those beautiful lighting artists' work, they all had a certain composition about them, in addition to the qualities such as color and intensity. And last but not least, go into any space and it will evoke a mood in the occupants, right? So, you know, does it feel like a workaday space? Does it feel like a party space? Is it relaxing like a restaurant in the evening or a romantic dinner? Or are you turning all the lights in the basement because you got to clean things up? Or in the garage, working under the hood on your car, all those types of things. So they all relate back to the qualities and functions. You know, here's a great shot of a misty morning. So it's like, again, can we see much? You know, a foggy morning, like we have a lot during the change of seasons here in southern New England, can limit visibility, you know, safety for driving, things of that nature.
Well, it's also atmosphere too. And
very atmospheric.
Atmosphere affects the mood and all sorts of things like that. We're getting down to the last minute, so if you have a few.
Right. So yeah, so you know, that can be from foggy day to crisp. So yep, we're going to see some different shots of architectural projects. So these sort of sum it all up, and these are all projects that I designed the lighting for that take all the forms and surfaces, the qualities of light.
These all look like workaday spaces.
Right. Some of them. This is a restaurant. Out from the outside, from the inside, can be more festive.
You know, it's not a
this is a fancy bar.
Yep.
Again, a lot of mood lighting in there.
Yep.
This is a rock climbing gym where you need to have some soft forms, and even cathedral, church spaces, ceremonial lighting in art galleries and museums. That happens to be the RISD Museum, a permanent exhibition there, or even the house lighting in a theater. And these are some buildings, part of the Brown University campus that I designed lighting for. So whether it's the outside or the inside. And the last couple shots here are the Experience Center where I work, where we bring architects and engineers and designers in to learn about the process of lighting.
Okay. We got to wrap it up there.
And that's the end.
Okay. Markus, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to see you as usual. And thanks everybody for joining us. And
thank you, Wayne.
And we'll see you next time on Art Matters.